You guys hopping on? Looks like we have a small roundhouse here. This is going to be the, lack of better words, most boring training you'll probably have this calendar year, but we'll go through it. We got a lot of jobs that are going to start up probably in early 21 after the holidays. So there'll be some good information in here for those of you that haven't been involved on getting a job off the ground and ready to go, just from a job startup, and then we'll also go through project closeout. So if you big picture of projects, 50% of the job is getting it started up, and a good portion of it is closing it out. And the owners really remember those two things, and construction's always going to be a grind to get through it. But if we can win the owners over on getting the job started up and getting it off and running well, usually sets a good tone for running a smooth project. And then obviously closing it out. We'll go through all the key points on closing it out, but it's a huge deal, and it's something that Brinkman as a company is taking additional initiatives to better ourselves in a closeout process to make sure we get the job closed out quickly, and the faster we get it closed out, the faster we get final paid. So we're going to go through an outline that kind of outlines everything to get it started up and closed down. Before we jump into that, we got Ethan on as well. So we're going to skip through and go through some safety items for job startup, and we'll let Ethan run through it for safety and SWIP, and then we'll let Ethan drop off and we'll jump back over to the outline and get started.
Okay, hope everyone's doing okay. Can you guys hear me all right, I guess, in the office here? Blake?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay.
Good.
So that slide you're looking at currently right now is a compliance-wise SRM setup form. Every job site startup will go through this. It is a form that is on Sharepoint, can be easily accessed underneath your job files, I believe. Everything that's on there needs to be filled out. The little boxes in the bottom are checklists that needs to be sent into Wrench Jackson, who performs the stormwater basic compliance at the AGC. I believe everyone needs to go through that. If you're on this meeting, if you haven't gone through that, reach out to me and we'll get you guys set up. The AGC trainings are the last Thursday of every month, I believe. Before you guys get set up on your compliance-wise system, you will have to go through a system called CEOS, which is a Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment portal, which stands for Colorado Environmental Online Services Public Portal. The owner and contractor, Brinkman Constructors or whomever, is 50% responsible for the project stormwater permit. So we'll have to get the stormwater permit portal line. If they haven't been a continuing client or a previous client, have to get signed up through the portal, do all the permitting process, which is usually done by myself with a director or above level for Brinkman Constructors and for the owner. And then once the application is reviewed, it'll go through a series of admin review, submittal processes of corrections if there is any, drainage areas, water discharge areas, sheet flow areas, so on and so forth. It's everything that tracks your submittals, your finances, everything on there is done through the portal system. I do that for our company, and I usually do that for the owner as well. If you haven't been aware of that and you're getting ready to start a project, make sure you talk to your director and me to get that going sooner than later. And it's better to do it at the very beginning than wait till the last minute, because it can be a lengthy process. I've got permits back in 2 days. I've had them back in 2 months. So that's a big process. And then the AHJs or local AHJs have different stormwater requirements, like Aurora, Boulder. They have different, more stringent requirements. So you guys need to check that as well before you guys are starting your project up, whether they want a specific BMP there or wherever they want it. Make sure you're asking them. Make sure you do a pre-con with your city people as well after you get everything all set up. That's a big win. Pretty much for the portal system for you guys really can't do much on that. You pretty much just give me in contact of the owner that you're going to be doing that, and I'd take the steering wheel from there. Here in the near future in 2021, we'll probably get together and have another sit down training when I apply for a new stormwater permit and have everyone understand what is going on in the day-to-day, to do it, so on and so forth, and then eventually turn that over to you guys. That way it alleviates me from just being their sole responsible for the entire company, for every permit, every change, every dollar, whatever the case might be. I'm done it all, and I'm running out of steam. So look forward to that in 2021. Do you guys have any questions with that?
I think that's pretty good, Ethan. We'll go to the next slide and we can go through safety. And then when you're ready, we can open up the Procore and run through that portion.
Okay. You see over there on the left, there's the English and Spanish version of the safety orientation, which is on YouTube. With the COVID being what it is right now, we are asking every job site team to issue the YouTube orientation video to the subs, have them do it wherever they please, their truck, at home, at the office, wherever the case might be, whether it's English and or Spanish. That way they're not coming into the trailer, watching the videos. I think it's like a 17-minute video. If you haven't watched it, you need to watch it. There's a sign-off form, which Blake will show you here in a second, but the sticker that they receive at the end of the safety orientation, I give you the rolls of 200 at a time. It is good for the calendar year that you are currently in. So if your 2020 sticker is good, it's good for the calendar year 2020. It'll be a maroon sticker for the calendar 2020, and the new ones will be black for 2021. Everyone will have to redo the 2021 for 2020 stickers, if that makes sense. So if you've already done the 2020 stickers on your job, and once it becomes January 1st, 2021, you will have to redo a refresher on your entire job site. I already have all the stickers. I'll give them to you guys in December. Every job site will have to do that. Blake, click that little sign off form there.
All right, 1 sec. I'm going to share my screen.
This is the Brinkman Orientation to Self-Safety and Health Policy sign-on form, which can be found underneath Procore. I believe it's underneath Job Tools, Documents, or Forms, and then you create a fill-out form at the top right-hand corner there. Blake's showing you how to get there.
Yeah, from Job Tools, you go to Forms, and then in the upper right-hand corner of that page on Procore is fill out a form. Then you'll go down and you'll have your same area you find your SWDs, filled POs, and then there'll be a safety orientation sign-off sheet, which is all there and user-friendly through Procore.
And then every person coming onto the job site that's working on a Brinkman construction job site is required to sign this form, participate in every safety orientation for whatever calendar year that they're in. If they go through the safety orientation once for that calendar year, they're good for any Brinkman construction job site in the country. We're just hoping that they understand the policies and not switching hard hats and to and from where the case might be. We're just trusting the fact that they've already went through it and so on and so forth. I don't know if this is on there or not, but the COVID stuff needs to be done daily as well. That's on that same way to get to this form. That also needs to be done, and pretty much until we tell you guys to stop doing it.
And that's for every worker on site, right, Ethan? Not just one per sub.
One per sub.
One, it is one per sub. Okay.
On the COVID forms, yes. Yeah. So what it is a foreman or whatever the case might be, signs off on their crew that they are accepting everything on that document for the COVID form every day. There will be some new correspondence here to come through pertaining to COVID here in the next, hopefully, hour, 30 minutes. You guys will see. But yeah, COVID's still a thing. Make sure we're cleaning up everything. That's a huge deal. That's pretty much it on my end, unless you guys want me to talk about something else.
Thank you, Ethan. We'll give anybody that wants to chime in, raise your hand if you have any questions for Ethan. If not, we'll let Ethan go on his way.
All good?
All good. All right, thanks, Ethan.
Thank you,
Appreciate
guys.
you chiming in.
See ya.
Right. Blake's going to give me back control here. I'll get the PowerPoint. We're going to start back at the beginning. Give me a second here. All right, so Blake kind of ran through, we're gonna just run through some project startup items. Here's a list of stuff we're gonna go through. I won't read it bullet by bullet. Closeout, we'll talk through final inspections, closeout documents as far as warranty, O&Ms, as-built. We'll get into punch list, how we manage the punch list in Procore, creating our post-mortem, and then our final pay request. So the first thing, a lot of times when we get a job, we get a set of documents. You'll get the geotech, the specs, drawings, and the more time you can spend up front on the beginning of a job, getting to know it will pay dividends at the end of the job. And this is where it's a good time to sit down, flip through page by page drawings and specs, come up with any questions you have. A lot of times it's easy to, go through, put together a notes sheet. It's easier to refer back to notes rather than trying to remember a specific note throughout an entire spec book or geotech, stuff like that. So it's a good time to identify VE items as well, so that once we go to submit our bid, we can send a list of VE items and tell the owner, here's a list of VE items we came up with going through our drawings. We got pricing for these items as well. We can save you X amount of dollars if you were to change this aspect of your project. It's also a good time to go through and figure out if you have any unique items in your project. I know Patrick was just talking in our ops meeting about a job he bid that had a bridge, which is a little more obscure work that we don't typically do. So it's a good time to identify those items so that you can get a jump on getting any items priced from subs that we don't generally work with. So just running through a check set, as in depth as you can at the beginning of a job will help you out throughout the project and at the end of the job, just, falling back on your knowledge that you gained during that time.
Yeah, to piggyback onto the check set and the importance of it, there's, for most jobs, and when you get a check set, this is going to be a hard set of drawings printed out, have Don get you half size printed out. So that way you can do a page flip. You're going to go through every page, every note, every detail on the page. And as you're going through each one, you're basically highlighting it after you've cross-referenced that the detail shown on the floor plan actually is a correct detail, whether it's a foundation plan and it's a cut through. So you're going to chase those details through the plans to make sure that they're all accounted for. That's the quickest way to realize that something's missing or something's not jiving. If the architect or the structural engineer or any of the engineers didn't do a quality job of making sure everything jives from detail to floor plans to elevations. And then once you go through your check set, it's a whole team process. So you're going to have probably 2 to 3 check sets as a project evolves. You'll have it before you put a price to it, your check set before bidding. So that way when you come in, you have a full list of questions. Then say you win the job, we're moving on. You're going to have another check set when you have a permit set come over and you're basically going through it again, doing double checking everything that you marked up on the original plans to confirm the things got cleaned up for the permit set. And then again, once you get through permitting, you're going to have multiple check sets. So it's also a requirement. Brinkman requires the building team to get together and everybody puts their check sets on the table. And we go through a page flip and you have your notes right there and you start talking through it as a team. And it really irons out a lot of items that you're going to deal with it one way or the other, whether it's at the front end where you get it cleaned up with the architect, or you're going to deal with it on the tail end. And that's basically repairing work or changing things, making field adjustments. And obviously, I think most of us all are aware it's a heck of a lot easier to figure it out on the upfront as much as possible. So set that half a day aside. It'll be well worth it once you get into the job and things are busy and everybody's rolling.
And I would say, yeah, the more questions we can come up with on the front end and then go to an owner with a list of questions shows them that we're taking the job seriously, that we're looking in depth and maybe, you know, looking at it a little more deeply than some of the other GCs that are bidding, and it can give us a leg up come, you know, bid award time.
Next item is bid book, and basically bid book in pre-con and getting it set up. You're going to have the bid book. You're going to reach out to Don or Karen, let them know that hey, this is the project. Here are the files that are sent to us, whether it came over from a developer or from a broker. She'll get a P file set up and get that number. We always want Don and Karen and our admins getting the P files and our job files, those numbers set up, as they'll be working with St. Louis and Kansas City. So we continue to use the appropriate file number. So don't get in a hurry where you go copy and paste. Always let Dawn get that teed up. She usually has it done in pretty quick, within a half day of you shooting an email with the documents. So then the bid book is basically a compiled book that's going to have everything pre-con wise all the way up until the project is awarded. So there's a specific structure Brinkman likes to have. So it's all about organization. We want all the correspondence between us and the subs. So critical correspondence, whether it's a sub shooting us some information for pricing, follow up on clarifications of proposals of what they have in and what they don't. We want to make sure that's all kept in the bid book. Additionally, with permits and front end documents, we'll start in the bid book, and then once the project, if we do get awarded, it'll venture and be evolved into the job book. We'll go through that here pretty quick. But
and then, yeah, just to add on to that, as a PE, is say, you know, it's really important just to keep that bid book nice and organized throughout the bid process. Make sure you're keeping the apparent low bidder on top. If you do get revised bids, make sure you're crossing those out, marking revised, stapling the new bid on top of the old bid. Keep everything as organized as you can, because as you know, on bid day, a lot of times there's the war room's full of spread out bids and everything. And if you're trying to find something in a snap and you gotta try to find the low bidder, if you know you've got your bid due in a few hours, it's a lot easier if you do the legwork to keep everything organized and stay on top of it, so that way you can find things easily.
in addition to the bid book, when our admin team prepares it and gives it to us, it has everything teed up. Project manager needs to run through and weed out tabs or relabel tabs that want to be specific to your job. So if you're working on an industrial job, there's going to be a handful of items that just you'll never have that trade or that proposal. So either take that section or that tab out or relabel it, keep the tabs there. You're going to have some that are going to pop up for special conditions that are specific to each project. But having it organized on the front end saves you, especially when you get into bid day. You don't want to be messing around with tabs. You want to have everything teed up, ready to go. Additionally, I'll go back real quick. On the bid books, so you're going to have your proposals, and you want to have those in sequence. There's going to be projects where we send over 4 or 5 proposals, iterations of it. And you want to make sure we have each one in the book. So that way we can quickly reference of, hey, on this date, we sent this information. We've updated it. Here's our next iteration of the proposal. So they're in sequence. Keeping those organized makes it easy. We always go back to Lucas could jump in any minute and need that book in order to win another project. So he's going to be sorting through it, and we want to make sure we have Lucas and Derek and the pre-con team where our books are in line so they can use that information to help us win other projects. All right, so then you roll in, you guys nailed it, you won the job, and basically the minute we get a verbal award, hey, this is gonna be your project, get going. It's kind of another notification over to Don or Karen to get a job folder set up. And so they'll have a specific job book that'll be set up, and it'll be the project manager's sole responsibility to manage and keep the job book in order. So everything evolves from your bid book, and then you'll be moving in as your scope review and buyout process, but getting a job folder and everything set up through Dawn is critical. Again, she's got a sequence with St. Louis. We want to make sure we do not duplicate a job number, because that job number will be stuck with the job name and that file for the life of the project and forever, lack of better words. So project managers will be the primary person to handle and make sure they're going to be responsible for having an organized job book up to date. Don and Karen do a solid job to keep change orders and everything organized. Whether it's blue, it means there's still outstanding signatures or finalization, and it's the PM's responsibility to make sure we close out and get contracts signed and change orders, forthcoming change orders signed and executed back from subs. So establishing the job book, right on the front, we're going to have the progress schedule. You're going to keep the updated schedule right there in the job book, have it updated so it's quick reference. You'll be jumping back in and out of the schedule quite often. You should be looking at your schedule multiple times, probably every day, and updating it weekly. Permit applications, you're going to have your applications in there to keep that information readily available. And then as permits are received, you want to make sure you're updating and keeping the permit with the permit application. I can promise pretty much everybody that's running a project or involved in one, you're going to reference back to a permit application, and you'll have to go back to the city and say, look, we provided the information, it's here, you signed it. And we're going through round and round with Commerce City and their jurisdictions right now and things that they've approved, and we've had to reference job applications. So as soon as you get a permit, don't think the application is worthless. You want to keep that in your job book and readily available. Utility applications. We're going to talk about utilities a little bit more in depth, but keeping that information on getting your application submitted and that paperwork. So you'll have to push your design team to make sure you have all your information, and it's Brinkman's responsibility to drive the bus. So getting utility applications into Excel, United Power, Colorado Springs Utilities, whatever power gas entity, we got to drive the bus on getting those teed up, because it doesn't matter what project you're on, they're going to drive the schedule and be a critical path item at some point. After utility applications, your standard unit cost sheet. So right after and we'll talk in more depth on unit cost sheet, but this will be something that needs to be in the job book. And I tacked right after we get the project awarded, we need to take our unit cost sheet and get it prepared and use everything we did from bid day, get that information in there. And then we'll have kind of a closeout unit cost that we can talk about of here's some things that, whether they're unbought or missed scope items, that would alter our unit cost that we need to make sure we account for. So that way we can use that unit cost for future pursuits. And it's Brinkman's way to know what things cost. So that sheet is extremely useful, and each project will be used multiple times. So having project engineer and project manager making sure that happens as quickly as possible, so it's not something that draws out and we're scrambling to put it together in the middle of a project when you should be focusing on running a job rather than chasing down stuff on pre-con. Next thing's copy of executed owner contractor contract. That's something that needs to be in the job book, and it should be tabbed. Basically, all the information. We'll go in more detail on it, but it needs to be tabbed and quick reference. So when you need to dive into it and reference something on it, you're going to go back to the owner contract quite often just to make sure you have your ducks in a row for things that are required out of Brinkman, or hold the contract, and so the owner is fully aware that some things he might think that we owe him, but contract it's not in the contract, or he might not be aware that that's not our responsibility. Then following with that is subcontracts in there, and those will be by tab. And so project manager needs to organize it and have tabs, adequacy, subcontract. And then there's a tier from subcontract. It's going to be broken down. And this is all about organization and having all the documents there that you'll need. So from subcontract to change orders, and they're going to be from the most recent and going back. So if you have 3 change orders, 3, 2, 1, subcontracts right there. So you have the latest contract amount on top, and then it goes all the way back to the original subcontract amount. Behind the subcontracts, buyout meeting notes. This is critical. There's going to be a meeting notes you want to keep, and then there'll probably be a follow-up meeting email that recaps a lot of items that you're going to be chasing down when you leave the meeting. So you want to make sure all that information's in there, gather everybody's notes, and get a compiled set. So you have a buyout scope review meeting note section in your book. And then you're also going to have the original bid and email correspondence, so that information's there. And then the sub bid analysis, which is basically a breakdown and a recap of all the subs and where they landed. And when you're setting up an analysis, to have all the subs and where they landed organized, so it's in the job book from your pre-con book, bid book.
So moving on from the kind of hard copies of everything in your job book, the electronic copies of everything will be kept in SharePoint / Procore moving forward as we transition to Procore. But for now, SharePoint, same thing as a P file. Get with the project assistant will help set up the job number and transfer your P file from that P file to a job. And I believe now the admins have been including that P file within the job file, so that if you do need to fall back on anything that was saved in that P file, it's within the job file. And you'll see that in a second. We'll pull up the structure of how it looks on SharePoint. So on your screen, you can see here, there's a Brinkman responsibility matrix. This is a really good tool if you're new to the company, or just if you have any questions kind of about how responsibility shakes out on the job. Obviously, there's a lot of ways as a PE that you can help your PM, even if it's not necessarily listed in this matrix, but nonetheless, it's still a good tool to reference. And this form can be found in the job startup folder of every project. It's the second folder. Well, technically the third after the double zeros and the 01. But yeah, just a good tool. It kind of breaks down responsibilities between PM, PE, your superintendent, the admin, and if you have an account specialist. So it's helpful if you guys have any questions. And I think we'll send this PowerPoint out as well. So if you need to reference any of these links or any of the documents we have in here, you can find it. So here's kind of how the file structure works in SharePoint. This should look familiar to you. This is how it's set up on every job. You can see down at the very bottom, that's where that P file is located. This was pulled from a Windcrest job. But basically you've got your plans at the top, and it works all the way through. You've got different files for all your change orders, pay requests to the owner, SWIPs, safety, QC, and then you can find subfolders within these for RFI submittals are within the plan rooms. You have your specs in there as well. So this is just a kind of refresher. I'm assuming everybody has seen this before. If not, let us know, but that should just be a refresher for everybody.
Next step is getting things set up in Viewpoint, which there's a specific to that task list or items that need to be completed. And forgive us, we have these documents, they're in our job folder. As it gets started, each of these forms are in there. I recommend always double checking with St. Louis accounting team. Those documents do get updated because they have function of being uploaded or imported into Viewpoint. So it starts as an Excel document that we'll fill out. But we want to make sure we're using the latest and greatest that's been updated. So using SharePoint's accounting folder for those forms is recommended to pull those forms. A lot of us hate to recreate the wheel, so we'll go back to our previous job and then use that as a foundation. But most likely, each job's gonna be a little bit outdated, knowing that by the time you get Viewpoint started up and closed out a job and starting a new one, most likely this form's changed. So job number, project setup form, and the SOV phase code setup. We'll go through that. We just want to make sure if you ever have troubles, you certainly reach out to me. I'm more than happy to help you make sure we got the right file, and working with St. Louis to start off fresh, because it's a heck of a lot more work to do it twice once you get everything set up, and then you gotta drop everything into a form so that way it works for accounting as they set it up.
So yeah, at the beginning of the job, we'll go through the project startup meeting with your project team. So as a PE, you should find this form underneath the job startup folder and go through, cater it towards your job. You can get, take out stuff that's not applicable to your job, maybe put in stuff that you want to make sure you hit on. Basically, it's a agenda to talk about the whole project at the beginning with your director all the way down through PE. Just get everyone on the same page at the beginning of the job, kind of sets you up on the right foot so that you hit all the bases and you don't miss anything. Kind of hit on check sets like Blake talked about earlier, reviewing that as a team, going through the status of all your permits, just even going through your project team summary, everyone identifying who the owner, architect, engineer is, talk about who you need to go to for certain RFIs, who's responsible for which scopes, that kind of thing. And then as you get through this meeting at the start, it will evolve into your monthly directors meetings. So as a PE, make sure you're coordinating that monthly with your director, kind of have a sit down meeting once a month as a team, get everybody on the same page, make sure you're talking about any subcontractor issues, ways that you can improve the project schedule, just go through all facets of the project so that everybody stays on the up and up, nothing gets missed, and it's just a good way to stay on top of things throughout construction.
And then on that job startup form, when you guys, project engineers and PMs get this set up, this is a document that as much information as you can pin down and dates you can put to it to keep your team moving and driving the bus in order to get everything set up. There's a a lot of things that have to happen to get the job off and running. So take this form take it seriously. When you come in and have the director there, have it ready, be prepared. Because there'll be questions to put pretty much everybody on the spot to be accountable in order to know what we're getting into and know the city and the jurisdiction, what type of permits are going to be required. This is a good meeting to have as much information as possible so it's productive and the directors can help us get a job off on the right foot. So come prepared for that startup form and kickoff meeting. Phase code setup. So this is typically going to be a project manager's to-do list, and getting the phase code set up quickly is important. You're basically going to take your original estimate or schedule values that went over to the owner. There'll be a few things that might get modified, whether it's scope items or things that get adjusted slightly after bid day. But if you get the project award, getting your schedule values teed up and cleaned up, ready to go and into Viewpoint it's a big deal, because there's a lot of things that can happen after Viewpoint's set up, and getting a bill over to the owner in order to get your front end cost over to the owner quickly is a huge deal. And part of that setup is getting your schedule values set up. So typically our schedule values needs to match what is going to be specifically agreed on with the owner. There'll be things that might get adjusted down the road, but want to get that teed up and make sure the owner is fully on board with how the schedule values is going to be set up on the pay app. And this is the starting point for it. So you want to, excuse me, you want to make sure they are fully on board with how you have it structured as well. So the page that's on the screen right now is pretty much everything that would be in your estimate. There's also a tab on this Excel spreadsheet that is specific to the schedule of values. It's a heck of a lot easier to have it teed up and make sure the owner's on board with how your pay app's going to be structured. So get that information from them, send them over a draft schedule of values, just in case. There's a lot of times their lenders or title company will have specific requirements of a schedule of values. So you want to make sure you get it teed up on the front end. It'll save you a heck of a lot of work to kind of manipulate or adjust Viewpoint down the road. And obviously saving accounting a lot of work from making changes or tweaks to the Viewpoint. All right, the next form is a project setup form. So this would go over in the same email when you send it over to accounting in St. Louis to get Viewpoint set up. In order to get Viewpoint set up, there's a lot of information that needs to be provided to accounting in order to get it set up correctly on the front end. And the new project setup form has a lot of information that'll be extrapolated from the owner contract. So project manager and project engineer to work together to make sure all this information gets put in there. There are things that can get populated down the road if the owner contract is something that isn't quite generated, or it's a new client, we haven't worked with them. But we want to get as much information as possible, because a lot of this stuff pulls directly to our future pay apps and documents. So getting all this information quickly and pushing to get it is PM and project engineer's responsibility.
All right, so I touched on it earlier, but also getting the project set up in Procore. This is now Brinkman's standard operating software that we are using out in the field to manage our projects. So make sure you're familiar with Procore before you're starting on a job. If you have any questions, concerns about Procore, we have a good training set up, I believe, with St. Louis that we can refer to, that we all went through during the spring. So the admin will help set up this project. Make sure when you get into your project, go through your company directory. Make sure you have all of the needed subcontractors and associated subcontractors within that company who you need to talk to throughout construction and who you need to be working with. A lot of times if you're sending out punch items or QC items and it's not going to the right guy, if you need a foreman on there or the super who's out in the field, make sure that they're in that, because sometimes that doesn't get exactly passed down from the top down if you don't have the right contact. So it's a good practice to go through your company directory at the beginning of the job. Make sure everyone's in there. If not, get with Karen or Don and have them add the necessary contacts so that you can get with all your subs directly. Also, touch base with them, make sure that they're seeing Procore emails go through, make sure they're familiar with the system. Sometimes Procore emails go to junk files for subcontractors, so touch base with them if you send them an email through Procore. Make sure they see it come through and make sure they're familiar with the system so that they know how to check things, because if used correctly, it's awesome. If the subs aren't checking it, if they're not using it correctly, then it doesn't help us as much. So just make sure to have those conversations with the subs up front. It'll help down the road. So on the screen is just kind of an example of what Procore looks like. The main screen, that once you dive into your projects, it breaks up between all the different structures of where the files are at, directory, submittals, RFIs, plans, specs. One thing to definitely do as soon as possible in the project is get your submittal log set up, and you can pull that directly from your spec book. We have a training on that. If you're not sure how to do that, feel free to reach out, but it's a great tool to allow you to track submittals from the beginning to the end of the job, because the sooner you can jump on submittals, the better. Obviously, you want to do that as close to the beginning of job as you can. So just make sure you do your legwork on the beginning, get everything set up properly so that throughout the process of construction and closeout, it makes for a much smoother process throughout.
All right, owner contract. So this is, I'll be preaching to you for a little bit. The owner contract is, lack of better words, is basically the Bible for our jobs. There's going to be some things in the owner contracts that are not Brinkman friendly or GC friendly, and PM's responsibility is to read that contract, and for granted, everybody on the team is responsible for knowing the owner contract in and out and reading it and digesting it. There's a lot of language in there, even myself, I struggle with, but we do have project engineers or project directors, and Lucas and Derek, they're good contacts to talk through how things are, the verbiage in the owner contract, and making sure we know what we're signing up for. And getting our attorney for new clients that have a contract that comes over to us, making sure Brinkman's attorneys get that in their eyes is a key point. So that way they can help look out for our best interests on a language that, lack of better words, doesn't fully resonate for fairly normal-minded contractors. So big picture, project manager's responsibility to go through that. Our next slide will go through it. But we do have Brinkman set up a contract summary, which is a really good document that can help everybody on the team at least dive in and pull out the meat and the bones, the guts of the contract, so you can know what our requirements are. And the contract summary set up, there's going to be some things that you need to dive into for projects specific, but the summary set up in order to get the major key items that everybody on the team should be aware of, because you're all going to have a part of meeting those contractual obligations. So with that summary on there, big things you're going to have to pull out is obviously substantial completion. Every project's going to have its own verbiage on what's required to meet substantial completion and everything. So that'll be something you pull out, final completion, what those requirements are to get the pay apps. And then the contract summary is actually a document that you can find in the project folder under owner contract. So the minute the owner sends that contract over, grab this summary, print it out, and then you can start marking it up and highlighting items to pull it out. That way you can get the meat real quick and know here's all the major items. When you sit down with the project director or sit down with Lucas and Derek, those things are teed up and you can get through the major bullet points. And then you and Derek and the director and the attorney can go through some of the language to make sure we at least have the conversation with the owner to make the language a little bit more mutual rather than bearing all the risk on Brinkman. So owner contract summary, I don't know if this is fairly new. We used it for most recently. I think there's been a couple versions of it, but this one, I know Richard DeLucci had brought one over with him from his former life. So what we have in here is it's got a lot of information to help everybody at Brinkman project engineers and managers pull this information out of the owner contract. So it's right here readily available. So this is a document that needs to be with your owner contract once it gets executed and put into your job book.
All right, so as far as permits and utilities setup, Blake touched on it earlier, but yeah, you want to identify what all utilities you have, what's our responsibility to get set up, communicate with the owner to figure out if there's anything that he's going to be setting up on his end, make sure that's communicated so that we know, if it's our responsibility to get this set up, we're doing it as soon as possible. As far as Excel goes, Nick Kroll is the new Brinkman advocate. If you've not talked with him yet, he's a good guy to reach out to if you have any questions on any of the setup permit stuff with Excel. Dry utilities, make sure you're getting those guys set up early as well. And identify if you have any joint trenching, if any of the dry utility guys are sharing trenches, it's a good idea to get a coordination meeting set up as soon as possible between all the parties that will be sharing that trench. Identify who's following who, who's doing the digging, who's backfilling, stuff like that. The earlier you can have everyone sit down, get in the same room or on a Zoom call, get everybody on the same page so that when it comes time to install, you're not asking those questions and getting them figured out while the guys are in the field. Figure out if you're doing, when you're going to have permanent power set up, if you need temp power in the meantime, who your entity is that's going to be providing that, get with those guys early as well. Reach out to your local AHJs and figure out their requirements. A lot of AHJs have online portals that require permit applications to be submitted through, your closeout documents to be submitted through, inspection requests. Get that figured out early in the job so that you don't have any issues there as well. If you have to get a grading permit, site improvement permit, foundation, your building permit, make sure you identify what application process you have to go through to get those. If you need to go sit at the city for hours on end till they'll give you your permit, it's worth it so that you guys can get off and running. Ethan hit on the ESC and SWIP permits earlier, but just make sure we're doing that locally as well as with the state. You want to get it set up with both those guys so that we have all bases covered, get the whole site included in our SWIP permit so that come inspection time and everything, we have everything incorporated within our site.
Project schedule, responsibility, this is one where a lot of our jobs have preliminary schedules teed up from the original bid proposal. And a lot of that's going to be pretty high level. It's going to show your critical path. And then it'll be the project team, the project manager, and the superintendent. Ultimately, the project manager is handling P6 with project engineer, also helping with updates. But responsibility ultimately falls on the project manager to get the P6 schedule dialed in. You're going to take most likely a pre-con schedule that for some of them do have a lot of detail. Some are more going to be high level, big picture, critical path items to get the overall end date. And then it's the building team's responsibility to extrapolate that, get it tidied up to make sure the correct drivers of how we're going to, every job might start when it's supposed to or when it was originally scheduled. A lot of times they're going to push, which are going to make you resequence the getting to the finish line, whether it's, hey, we got to find a way to move up utilities, or utilities are going to have to push back a little bit in order to get the buildings up and running. So those are items that need to be evaluated and modified, and ultimately kind of pull plan backwards. Here's your end date. That one's not changing. So step it backwards and get the schedule created. This is something that needs to be updated. I update it usually on Mondays, so that way you get a full view of what happened the week before, and then you get a fresh schedule on that Monday the following week. But you'll need to pull from your owner contract what you're contractually obligated to provide the owner, whether it's an updated schedule at every OAC or they need a CPM schedule updated monthly. So that'll be something that's specifically outlined in your owner contract, and it's Brinkman's responsibility to make sure we hold our end of the deal and provide those updates. Having a honest, updated schedule is critical to the success of the job. I think anybody that plays enough with a schedule can make it look fine. Everything's going to look like gravy until you get to the finish line, and here you are. You got 3 months of work and you only have 1 month to do it. So keeping that schedule and making sure it's honest and accurate, and you hold your subs accountable to them is going to drive the project, whether it's going to go positive or go south pretty quick. All right, then jumping into buyout meetings. So this is just a personal comment, but buyout can have a negative tone to it when you use it out in the sub community. So using the scope review or setting the precedence when you sit down with the subcontractors for a buyout meeting, make sure you're prepping them to understand, hey, this is a scope review. It's in both of our best interests to make sure that everything's outlined, everything's accounted for. Let's talk about sequencing, materials. You're going to go through everything. So it's a meeting to be a scope review and make sure what they have in their number is accurate. And it's also an opportunity to get them talking. And it's, Lucas always tells me, it's in order to get a subcontractor talking, awkward silence sometimes is the best way to get there. And the sooner that you can kind of get them talking about what it is they do, how they like to run their work. A lot of times they'll start airing out dirty laundry, and you'll start realizing that they're holding money in there as covering some risk that, hey, you know what, we have somebody else picking this up, or no, you don't need to be carrying that. We have it covered with this contractor, or we're sequencing work in this form. You won't need to have that type of crane to access from this point. So those are the things that we want to get the sub talking, get them to air things out that they're holding dear to them. Mostly from a buyout, that's an opportunity to get the right number and a detailed scope. So Brinkman's, we continue to push it every year. Buyout meetings are extremely important in order to get the correct scope for the correct cost, and make sure when you leave that table, everything's accounted for and signed off. So there's going to be things you want to have them initial, and you know what, we're sitting at the table. We want your estimator there. We want your project manager, and we want your foreman. So everybody's on the same page with, this is what's in the number, And if you don't have it, then we need to understand what it costs. And we obviously don't want them adding money in there, but we certainly don't want to go to contract with a sub that says, yeah, we got it, we'll take care of it. And then you get out in the field and yeah, they said they have it. If they don't have the money in for it, they're gonna just scoot by, lack of better words. They're gonna just get it by, whether it's less quality, poor quality, and do just enough. So I think it's in both everybody's best interest to make sure they have a full scope and their number reflects it.
And I would just say, yeah, as a PE, when you're setting up that meeting, just to reiterate, be upfront about the meeting, let them know it is a scope review meeting. It is not a bid award necessarily. You just want to sit down, make sure they have everything covered. You may or may not be meeting with other subs as well in the same scope. Just be upfront that it is not a project award. I've run into that before.
Yeah, and I think it's also, it's a good deal to be honest with them and let them know that, hey, you know, you are in the running, but we are meeting with 1, 2, 3 other contractors, and things are tight. So it matters on commitments on schedule, manpower, workload, and is this a new product type for them? So. And there's a lot of guys that just want their foot in the door with Brinkman, and we need to make sure yeah, we definitely want to work with new contractors. We want to make sure we vet them out as much as possible, so it's not a problem down the road. So in the scope meetings on the front end, when the project engineers getting these meetings set up, it's good to have an email teed up when it goes over to them, or a calendar invite, and we want to make sure that they have their estimator, their PM, and their superintendent foreman is available. If those 3 guys aren't available, or one of the 3 guys aren't available, it's kind of a pointless meeting. We want to make sure that they're there and available. That's the best way to make sure we have everything covered and have an accurate scope. Make sure they bring if possible, get their detailed takeoffs to have in, so we can look at it together. A lot of things come out of, hey, you know what, they got extra takeoff here. We didn't need them to pick up that much asphalt. It's actually going to stop right here at the entrance because the right-of-ways were poured by the right-of-way pans were poured by the developer, that kind of stuff. Those are a lot of things that subs are going to try to cover their risk, but also we don't want them to miss something and then we're all looking at each other of, well, you said you had it, and it's clear that their takeoff didn't have it. So getting subs talking, so asking lead questions that require more than a yes or no. So we want them to start airing things out. So let's get things started off. We'll kind of explain what's in your number, get them talking, where no, they can't just give you a yes or no. And what we have in here, silence is golden. And Lucas is right every time he tells me it. So if you kind of sit there and just let them awkwardly sit there with silence, sooner or later, it's going to be awkward enough that they'll start talking and get them, open them up. And it's Brinkman's, I mean, we're team players. So we want to make sure they understand that we're in this together, but ultimately it's their responsibility to have a complete scope, because we're a general contractor, but we're not out there performing the work. We're not the professionals in each trade. Our job is to manage safety, quality, contract, and then deliver the project to the owner. It's subcontractor's responsibility to put the work in place.
So after we have those buyout meetings and we're ready to award to a subcontractor, we want to notify them as soon as possible. Don't string them along. We don't want them going elsewhere once we've decided to go with that sub. So make sure we're keeping in contact with them and let them know as soon as possible that they've been awarded the job. As far as awarding bid results to other subcontractors, if they reach out to you, make sure you're responding. Same thing. Lucas touched on it in the ops meeting. You know, if we bid a job to an owner and we didn't hear back, it'd be pretty frustrating. So if they're reaching out to us, make sure we're responding. If the owner hasn't awarded the project yet, don't give them bid results unless they're way out of the running. At that point, you can let them know, hey, you guys weren't competitive on this one. Feel free to pursue other work. But don't provide too accurate of bid results until the owner is awarded. If they do reach out to you, just be upfront with them. Hey, we haven't heard back from the owner yet. We're still waiting to hear back. We're anticipating a response by X date. I'll follow up with you then. What I've done in the past too is it takes a little time up front, and the admins could help you with this too. But if you go through when you've completed a bid, and I've got an Excel spreadsheet set up that I put in each scope, every single bidding sub and their name and contact. Because, if you've bid a pretty large job, you're dealing with up to, it could be over 100 subs that you're getting numbers from. It's really hard to keep track. If Nick sends you an email, you can't remember who he works for. So it's a good idea to keep a tracking document so that you can make notes if they've reached out to you, if you've emailed them back, if you've given them results, so on and so forth. It's just a way to track. And that way, once you do get answers back from the owner, it's a really easy way to pull from that spreadsheet who you need to reach out to, give them bid results. It's just a simple way to track that. And as far as bid results, percentages are best. You don't have to be extremely specific to the cent. If you just can give a percentage to them, don't, be honest, don't lie. They know their market. They probably get bid results from other GCs too. So they're going to, if Brinkman gets a reputation that we're not giving accurate bid results, that's not the reputation we want. So be upfront with them, be as honest as you can, without being too specific. Vaguely specific, I think, would be the word for that. And then once you do get them the award, get them their subcontract as soon as you can. PEs get on top of them, asking for shop drawings, other submittals as soon as we can, so that we can get the ball rolling on all that, especially long lead items, elevators, stuff like that. The sooner you can get that going, the better, because it takes a lot of time on their end to put that stuff together.
So additional to that is so the sub market, the GC market. Denver is a small community when you start looking at it. Most of all contractors, subcontractors, typically they've all worked for multiple GCs, but they've worked for different electricians. I mean, if you sat down with an electrician, it's a good chance he's worked for 2 or 3 others. So they have contacts. They all talk. So I can't stress being honest with them. Give them honest feedback. They're one phone call away from leaving the office and calling their buddy over at ADK or whoever it is and getting some feedback on what Brinkman's telling them. I mean, I'd be the first one to tell you they do talk. They know when we're bullshitting, and that's not a reputation we want. So be fair, be honest, but be firm.
So after project buyout, as a PE, you're responsible to start putting the unit cost spreadsheet together. There's a couple different templates that we have saved in Sharepoint. There's one that's geared towards the commercial projects, and we also have one geared towards unit-based projects. So once you complete this, you want to go through it and put as much detail as you can. If there's some scopes that are lacking and you don't have a lot of detailed breakdown, reach out to the subs, get as much information from them as you can. We've got an example on the next slide of a well put together unit cost. The more in depth you can go on these, then the better it benefits Lucas and other guys bidding a project down the line that may be similar, that they can fall back and pull unit costs from this project, and it makes the future, projects a lot easier. So doing the unit cost on this project may be long and tedious, but it does pay dividends. Whether you see them or not, there's somebody that's benefiting from it. So once you do get this put together, make sure you're sending it over to your director and Lucas for a final review. Once they've reviewed it, you've got it as accurate as you can. They agree, it looks good. You'll publish that, and then you'll also get it printed and put it in your job book. Keep a hard copy. So the more thorough you can be on these, here's a good example. You can see it doesn't just say, you know, cast in place concrete, one lump sum. It's got it broken down between tilt panels, grade beams, footings, backfill, concrete stairs even is broken down. And then you've got your contact sub that gave you this info, the project. So the more in depth you can be on this, those unit costs will benefit down the road. So just take the time to put it together, and I know Lucas will appreciate it. And then this is our SWIP setup and safety that Ethan talked about at the beginning of the job. And then that'll bring us to closeout. So this is kind of just a definition of the objective of a project closeout. It's to finalize all contractual obligations with the owner, provide the owner with a complete set of closeout documents for their use, and effectively document the completion of the project. As Blake touched on earlier, closeout's really the lasting impression you leave on an owner. It's a chance to leave them with a good taste in their mouth and not leave items outstanding for a long period of time where they're remembering, oh yeah, I remember that Brinkman project we had, and they dragged on for a year past our substantial completion date. It's hard to get subs to that last finish line. They want to get their work done and leave, and then it's, you know, hard to get their closeout documents. But the more you can push on them, the quicker we get everything closed out, the better impression we leave with owners, and they can lead to further client relationships down the road.
So closeout process, preparing the final pay app and getting things closed out with subcontractors, I'd say is probably one of the most important things. And you want to make sure you're prepping the owner with, a lot of our projects have kind of a tiered closeout, whether it's a multi-building complex. There's a lot of jobs that have some major trades that are going to be up front. So if you can get them and get their final change orders, get their final price, make sure there's no hidden cobwebs or work SWDs that are out there that are overlooked, or subs been sitting on it. You want to make sure you get those up front right away. That way at the end of the job, you're forecasting, everything's accurate, and you're not disputing over a change order or a back charge. So we want to make sure you're issuing those and chasing them down. So the goal is to get a final pay app into the owner, and then it's the project manager's responsibility to push for resolution on, hey, if the owner's requiring an additional document, it's our job to chase it down. And a lot of times there's going to be documents that the title company that's going to need and require before they release that final draw. Additional final payments, all subs and suppliers. So I like to, as soon as a subs is pretty much done with their work, and they're starting to get ready to pull off site, I mean, I usually have an email. It's kind of just a draft email that I have in my special folder that goes over to them, and it says, hey, your work's coming to a close, and it's just a confirmation. There's no outstanding change orders or expectations. From our side, we have nothing further in our contracts. Here's the final contract amount, and we'd look to have a final pay app from you. So getting that and getting final pay apps, getting the retention pay apps teed up and compiled, that's going to be extremely critical to getting the job closed out and getting it closed out with accounting. So additional to that, your final job cost, basically as you work through all of your final payments to subs and final pay apps, you need to have certainly no estimated remainings, but your job costs need to be completely zeroed out. So that's also reaching out to some of our suppliers, whether it's toilets, trash can, dumpsters, the trailer rental, anything that we might have an open account with, PM and work with Joy to reach out to them, make sure there's no outstanding invoices that are lost or didn't realize they were still outstanding. So you want to get those closed out so that way nothing else trickles in. And our job is to know what our job cost is going to be and forecast it accurately. And so getting it closed out is a key to avoiding profit fade. Scanning in Apple job files. So this is mostly, we need to make sure we have hard copies as they come from the city, whether it's TCOs, our change orders, and our O&M information. We need to have that in there's going to be, over the next year, 2 years, however long your warranty is, you're going to be referencing a lot of those documents, and those dates are critical for ultimately getting the job off our books, whether it's warranties or turning over to the owner. And job folders, I'd probably be the first one. I think I'm on 6 or 7 jobs with Brinkman, and right now all my job folders are still active. So that's also something, once your job's fully closed out, warranty's complete, you need to be working to get that job folder moved to an archive. There's a lot of information in there, and we want to get it archived and saved and free up some of the bandwidth all that information takes up.
So to get our certificate of occupancy, TCOs, final permit, and close out everything from the project, we want to make sure we're involving the AHJs early. We want to get our building, city, fire department finals. We want to get those all approved so we can get our CO or TCO, depending on your project and how you're closing things out. But you want to meet with these guys weeks before, if not more in advance than that, to make sure you understand the requirements that they're going to be asking from you, what you need to get corrected. If they give you a deficiency list, anything that needs to be corrected, make sure you're doing that as soon as possible, having your subs correct those items so that come time for your final, it's a quick, seamless process. Nothing's worse than thinking that you're getting your final that day and the inspector shows up and asks why this item hasn't been corrected. It was on a list, a few weeks ago, and they're never happy when they have to come back. So the happier you can make those guys, we kind of talked about it at the beginning, but talk to them at the beginning of the project as well. Just make sure you're familiar with the process, the city you're in. If you've got an online portal that you need to have your inspections requested through, kept up on, make sure you're doing that throughout construction so that you don't hit the end of your job and say, oh, where's all of our inspections? I thought we've been having them kept up, but we don't have a record of it. Make sure that you're keeping up with that. If you have MEP guys that are walking with the inspector, make sure you get a synopsis from that walk, what happened in it, and if there was any corrective items or action items that came of that walk. Verify your permit cards are pulled and make sure that they're all signed prior to your AHJ taking them. And then once all the governing authorities have performed their final inspection, then their building is able to be occupied. You can usually get your C of O filed through the city, and then make sure you're getting a copy of that, scan it, PDF it, save it in Sharepoint, save a hard copy in the job book, keep a copy on your trailer, as many copies as you have of record of that certificate, so that if somebody comes looking for it, you have it and you know where to find it. If you have any items that have refundable deposits, that would be the time to reach out, start trying to get those deposits back, let them know where you're at in the project, let them know your process, how close you are, or if you've already gotten your C of O, so you can get those deposits back. Make sure if you have a stocking permit that's going to be required or anything like that from the owner, talk to the owner beforehand so that you take the correct steps to get those as well. Basically the moral of the story on all of this is more legwork you do up front, it's going to pay dividends at the end. As far as tracking closeout items from subs, this is a good example of a tracking sheet. Work with your project assistant to get these put together. It's a really nice tool to utilize so that you can refer if you've got a sub that you're like, oh, I can't remember if he sent me O&Ms with original submittals, stuff like that. You can fall back on this. It's an easy way to track it. You can see there's a note section on the right that Karen was utilizing where you can track if you were following up with subs, how many times you've reached out to them, when you reached out to them. Like I said, a lot of times subs are very reluctant to give out their closeout info. So the more you can hound these guys and the earlier you can hound them, it really behooves them in the end as well, but it's a lot easier said than done to get that from them sometimes. So this is a good tool. If you have any questions where to find this or anything, let me know, or get with your project assistant and help putting this together. As far as warranty and O&Ms, go through your specs at the beginning of the job, and you can put together a spreadsheet of required O&Ms, required warranties, attic stock, owner training. The more of that you identify at the beginning, send that over to your owner for review, because a lot of times there are items that they don't really have an interest in getting, whether it be additional attic stock on carpet that they don't think is going to be necessary, or perhaps there's an item that's not listed in the attic stock or O&Ms that they do want. And then at that point they can identify it, and then you can tell your sub that way. You get it and it's identified early in the job rather than at the last second, and then it's a little bit harder for them to get attic stock. Make sure you understand the number of O&M copies, how they want them, if they want 3 hard copies and binders, if they want 1 electronic copy, if they want 3 hard copies and electronic copy. Just communicate with your owner, and also refer to the spec book if nothing else, and get everything according to the specs. So I talked a little bit earlier about the submittal log. Make sure your closeout submittals are included with that. If you have some guys that want to send you O&Ms early, that's awesome. The earlier the better. So just make sure you're tracking that, save it somewhere, put it in a tracking log that you've already got it, so you don't forget that you've already gotten it from those guys. And then notify your subs. If you're having trouble, let them know that final payment will not be made until all closeout items have been received. That's usually the best thing you can do to light a fire under subs is, the threat of not receiving payment. And that's usually a good way to get these things from them. I try not to, get into threats or withholding anything as early as I can until it gets to the point where the project's closed and you're waiting on 1 sub or something. Then it might be time to let them know that that's going to happen. But as much as you can communicate with them beforehand, then usually it doesn't come out of surprise when you ask for closeouts. Let's see. So as far as archiving documents, get with your admin. You want to get 2 complete sets of closeout documents put together. You can send those to the owner. You want to have a complete set for us as well. Make sure you have all your job books, CCD books, everything you've had from the field, shop drawings, as-builts, RFIs, submittals, everything that needs to be archived. Talk to the admins about getting hard copies and electronic copies put together. Make sure you're doing it in an organized fashion. I know Don and Karen don't like when you just come back from the trailer after a year and dump 6 binders on their desk and a few rolled up drawings and tell them good luck. So as much as we can help them out, I know they'd appreciate it. Owner and operator training. So you want to make sure that this is discussed with the owner as well. A lot of times they'll have operations staff that's going to run the building after it's turned over, and you want to make sure that the correct parties are there. If you have a kitchen, you're going to have a lot of different training probably on different ovens, hoods, all that good stuff. So make sure if there's a kitchen staff, you want to have them be a part of that. Talk with the owner and look through the specs as well about video requirements. Sometimes they want to make sure all the trainings are recorded. Sometimes the trainer will not let you record it. So just make sure you look into that, talk about that as well, so that if they show up and it's supposed to be recorded and you don't have something to record it, it's not a fun position to be in. So just make sure you're understanding what's required of these owner trainings. And then we've already hit on TCO, final occupancy. make sure we're getting those, saving them in a safe place for future reference. And then talk with your owner about scheduling an 11-month walkthrough prior to your 1-year warranty expiration. You want to get that done at 11 months so that if any items are identified at that point, the subs have 30 days to get everything corrected before their warranty period expires. If you wait till after the warranty period, it might be a little bit more difficult to get subs to show up to actually correct those items. So 11-month, get that set up as soon as you can. Here's just an example of some as-built. So you've got some red line drawings. You can talk with your engineer. He may be putting together a record set with all of your as-built at the end of the project. If that's the case, make sure you're getting all the as-built over to him so that they can compile the record set of drawings, figure out the same thing, amount of copies, how the owner wants to see them. Your local AHJ, if they need to be submitted through an online portal, if they want hard copies, just have those discussions so that once you get them there, it's a quick, seamless turnover to those guys, and then keep a copy for our archives as well. All right. So as far as punch lists, one of the biggest issues we run into is when you get on a project and the architect creates a punch list and the city creates a punch list and we create a punch list, and you've got all these different lists floating around. Make sure you set that expectation up front that we're going to have one punch list. That's going to be the list that everybody follows. Once everything's corrected on it, it'll be signed off on. Make sure it's sent out frequently to your subs and to your owner so that he knows items are being tracked and corrected. We utilize Procore for the punch list, and we'll have a slide. The next slide shows kind of a snapshot of how that looks on Procore. But yeah, we'll use Procore to manage the punch list, and this falls back on what I said earlier, making sure you have the correct contacts in Procore. So when it comes time punch list, make sure your subs are getting that in the right person's hands, who's going to actually be correcting those items out in the field. Otherwise, it just kind of falls on deaf ears. So make sure you're keeping up with that. Send it out as often as you can. If a sub tells you he corrected something, go double check it in the field. Follow up, make sure it's actually done, get a picture, then close it out on Procore. Prior to doing that punch list with the engineer architect, feel free, earlier in the project, get started on an internal punch list, a deficiency list, start tracking things as soon as possible. If you're doing a QC list throughout the job, you can roll that into your deficiency list. Just give us a head start so we can minimize the punch list as much as we can. 0 punch is always the goal. Don't know if it's ever been achieved, but certainly worth striving for. So as many items as you can get corrected before it comes to full punch list time, the better off you'll be. We talked about the punch list, establishing one, make sure once it's complete, everyone signs off on the punch list. It'll be a seamless process, and your owner will be happy that you're keeping on top of it and managing it well. So here's just a snapshot from Procore. You can see on the left, just kind of a snip. You can see all the grayed out punch items. Those are all complete and closed out. If you have open items, they'll be blue. They're easy to click on. You can jump right into them, add pictures, add notes. And it's really easy to close it out on the iPad or just on your phone. It's also a really nice tool. The way you can print it with the pictures and the drawings, you can filter by sub. So I like to filter by sub and send those out at least once a week. When you've got multiple subs on a job, let them know these are your items. If you've got 10 pages, obviously they need to be getting on it. So it's a little bit easier when you send subs just their items rather than issuing the entire punch list and they don't take the time to filter it for themselves. So just communicate as much as you can with owners and subs throughout the punch list process.
Postmortems, and I think a lot of people might think this is something that you'll create and put together at the end of the job. And honestly, this is something that needs to be prepared on the front end right after, as part of we have a pre-mortem, and we need to add that into this training. But projects are going to be required to do a pre-mortem where it's the job team, the directors, and everybody sits down and tries to think through 7 to 8. Here's critical items that we can potentially discuss, coordinate, review, pay extra close attention to, and put together a plan of attack to avoid challenges that we can foresee potentially impacting the job. Ultimately, a post-mortem is something Brinkman does, and a lot of you have been involved in it, and it's a perfect opportunity for Brinkman to learn from other projects, and hopefully, I mean, we've all had the jobs that were extremely challenging, and there's things that we would never wish upon any of our other coworkers to have to go through. So as much as we can download to our coworkers and everybody else at Brinkman, postmortem's a perfect opportunity to do that. And it's also an opportunity to tell your story, talk about the job. Here's the things that we did really well. Here's the things that we planned out, things that worked out in a quality manner. And here's a lot of things that we planned or missed, and we're gonna catch it on the next one. So it's an opportunity to put everything, recap the job, and everybody can learn from it. So as you're working through the job, the PM and the PE have that open dialogue. You can set it up in Procore where it's a document that you can basically have similar like a OneNote running list of, we just ran into this. Inspector stuck it to us in Colorado Springs. We did a sit down with some of the teams. We got a couple of projects that are going to be kicking off with project managers that haven't worked in the Springs. We sat down with them and kind of recapped, going through a lot of those items that you don't want the other PMs or PEs, supers to have to learn on their own. So anything we can download and put into a postmortem, it's definitely worth time and everybody's effort, because there's a lot of people that are going to learn some good stuff. And if it can avoid a situation of us spending money or having a project delay, if we can avoid any of that on future projects, then it's worth every minute we put into a postmortem for a previous job. So everything on there, I'm pretty sure Ted recently sent out a postmortem report format, and we got a new Brinkman way to update and make sure we have this content included in it. And it's a document that we'll reference back to down the road, so we can, if somebody's come and gone and no longer here, we have this document to reference back and learn as much as we can, so we can carry it over. So I highly recommend get that on your teams, get it started early on, and don't make it be something you're scrambling to put together just in time for training. This is something that's a thought process through the entire job.
Any questions?
All right, so we'll finish up. Looks like everybody's pretty good. If you have issues or want to talk about, hey, I need help getting a job started up, where's the job cost or job startup files, come grab me. Happy to help you. We can run through it and get you teed up, make sure you're working to get a job started up the right way.
Can you hear me?
Hartzell, appreciate the feedback.
All right. Thank you guys. Appreciate you joining.
All right, thanks guys. Take care.